Ah, Jaws. Classic story of shark bites, man. It's a classic, right? All-time classic, one of the best movies ever. Launched Steven Spielberg's career, kind of kicked off the whole summer blockbuster phenomenon. A really big deal. So it stands to reason a video game was made based on it. Here's the problem. Jaws the movie came out in 1975. Jaws the video game, 1987. Here's the other problem. That initial Jaws movie, such a success that it ended up becoming a whole franchise with sequel after sequel. 3 sequels in all. The worst of them, I mean, they were all bad, but the worst of them had to be the 4th one, Jaws the Revenge. It's considered the 34th worst movie of all time on IMDb.com with a 2.9 rating. That's out of 10, by the way. Yeah, that movie came out in 1987. See, same year as the NES game, which lends credence to the idea that it's based on that movie, the game, based on that movie. That's not good. That's not good, right? Not a good way to start here. Also not good. The entire project took a month to complete. And it was made entirely by 3 people. One of those 3 people said they were so disappointed in the final outcome that they would have actually preferred their names not be on it. And it turns out their names weren't in the final credits, though for an entirely different reason. To be fair, there are issues that you would think would lead to a bad overall game. And while I do say it's a simple game, simple, straightforward, not too many stages or frills, I actually think it's a good game. In fact, it's one of my most played games, something I come back to again and again and again, because it executes its goal so well. And it fills that niche that I think the original Nintendo best fills in our culture today. Obviously, huge advancements in the video game industry since then. Some of those more immersive titles just don't hold up. But something that you can jump into, play for 20 minutes, complete it, find the whole experience to be fulfilling. I think that's what those are the Nintendo games that probably age the best, and Jaws certainly fits that description. At least for me. Video games, am I right? We've all been there, done that with an expansive catalog spanning generations, companies phased in and out. Most of us have probably lost track of what all's even out there. Used to be we all worked off the same library, the titles rolling off our tongues like letters of the alphabet. It was the time of the Nintendo Entertainment System, and it was rad. There were tall tales and urban legends, rumors of what that next impossible-to-reach level might look like, codes and secrets that all sounded too good to be true, and then that one kid who claimed he had beaten it already. And every game left a legacy, its imprint so enduring that the mere mention stirs up emotions in us all. This is All That's Fit for 8 Bits, a tonally upbeat journey through the original NES library. And I'm Scott White. So let's go ahead and jump into what I find so captivating about this often maligned and overlooked game, beginning with the title screen, of all things, where the no-frills approach was made immediately apparent. See, most of the time when you insert the cartridge into the system, you hit the power button, you're greeted to what? You're greeted to a black screen, usually with white lettering on it. It might be credits, it might be kind of the video game equivalent to a vanity card showing the company responsible. No, in Jaws, you hit the power button, and immediately, boom. It's the classic Jaws theme by John Williams. It's that 8-bit version of it anyway. Along with, fittingly, a pair of jaws lined with sharp and pointy teeth connected to a shark that's leaping out of the water, the point of his nose forming the A in the title, Jaws. Just looking at its hollow shark eyes all cloudy and black is enough to make me want to sock it in the nose. Though on the screen here, for some reason, they made those eyes red, I guess to be more menacing, as if the teeth weren't enough. There's no mystery what you're dealing with. The stakes are high right away. It's beat the shark or get eaten, basically. And you know that. You know that. The mood is set. And for the most part, the game does a good job of setting the mood. Jaws is, at its heart, a monster movie, and you get that sense that a monster's lurking around every corner, because it basically is. You hit start, there are no options or anything, you're just shown the get ready screen, and I call it the get ready screen because that's literally what it says on the screen. It says get ready, ! It shows an image of the boat about to set sail. It shows the number of lives you have. This is basically the screen that tells you how many lives you have left. You know, you see that in a lot of screens. You see that in the original Mario. But what's weird about this one is that it plays its own little theme. Well, that's different. Memorable. I don't know why exactly they felt it was necessary to do that, to actually instruct you to get ready and give you a few seconds, complete with a melody, to do that. And I don't know if it's not like you're thrown right into the fight usually thereafter, but whatever. It gives the game a unique touch. And a fleeting moment of the upbeat before being thrown into something dire. You know it's dire right away because this music starts playing. All right. A little more what you had in mind, right? The anxiety level goes up a little. You already feel like your moves have consequences, right? You do something wrong, it could lead to your demise. Well, we're not quite there yet. This is the overhead map view, and it presents no immediate danger. You control a boat on a body of water that I always took to be that stretch of ocean between South Florida and the Bahamas. Though I don't really know, I haven't seen Jaws the Revenge, I don't know where it takes place. I know the original Jaws is in the Northeast, but whatever, it's water, it's land. And amid it all, a giant shark lurks. You know this in part because you see his fin pop up from time to time. And if this fin were to make contact with you, this sound would play. Oh my gosh. How unnerving is that? I mean, it's creepy, right? Not like a jump scare or anything, but a combination of notes that just doesn't sit right with you. And for good reason, you just hit Jaws. And if for some reason you were unclear on that point, the screen actually says, "You've hit Jaws!" ! This is not something you should be looking to do yet. And while on the one hand it could probably go without saying, you don't want to engage with the final boss of the game from the very get-go, the fact the game allows you to, I think, made for a confusing experience for people back in 1987, back when games pretty much all followed a typical formula. You would progress level by level by level by level until reaching the final boss. It was very linear. You didn't have a lot of say in the progression, but the progression was steady and the progression was clear. Well, progression is still the name of the game here. It's just done in a less traditional way. Basically, you progress by sailing your ship back and forth between two ports. You start with what I'm going to call the southern tip of Florida. You start at that port, and then you sail across the ocean to what I'm going to call the port in the Bahamas. And each time you land at the opposite port, you progress. You get a power-up of some kind that will make it possible to defeat Jaws later on. It also plays this fun little fanfare when you arrive. How's that for a carrot? Such a catchy little tune. Soon enough you find yourself humming along in Not long after that, you find yourself pre-planning lyrics to sing along with it as soon as you dock. Holy roly poly, we are going out for pizza after school. Nailed it. Sorry, Mr. Mason, I don't know what happened to your favorite drill. One more time. Hello, operator, I would like you to connect me to your mom. You get the idea. Okay, so ping-ponging between ports collecting power-ups. Now that's obviously not complicated, but because it was so atypical, because it didn't provide that straightforward path to the next level and made it possible to take on the main boss right away, that's what a lot of well-meaning children did. And fittingly, they didn't have the firepower to take Jaws down. They got frustrated. They said this game is lame. Let me move on to something else. Patience, young children. It won't be long until you have the firepower. You just have to build up to it. Okay, so let's talk about how you do that. Well, I already told you, right? You just make a beeline from port A to point B. In theory, yes, but if you start down that path, it won't be long before you hear this. But wait, I'm not going after Jaws. I didn't see a shark fin. Why is this happening? Well, look, they decided to incorporate an old school RPG element in here too, the random encounter. Yes, that's how the overhead world map works. Even if you're not pursuing Jaws, even if you don't see that fin, you could still hit something. Well, you're in for a disappointment. Chances are you're not going to see that something. What you're going to see is the screen where you'll be spending most of your time. The underwater view. You're no longer controlling a boat, but a man in scuba gear, armed with a harpoon gun, ready to take down anything that moves. He has great incentive to do so. His currency for those power-ups, the whole purpose from sailing port to port, is most commonly found by defeating one of our friends of the sea. Most commonly stingrays, which travel from left to right or right to left on a straight line across the screen and require several hits to defeat. You just line the swimmer up as one of them is swimming across the screen, hit the B button a few times, and see what he drops. If he drops a conch shell, some people say conch, me being a South Floridian, I say conch, well, you're in business. Literally. Whatever entities are handing out your power-ups, this is what they accept in the form of money. Conch shells, which look like... They kind of look like ice cream swirls, purple and white. So yeah, that's what you're looking to get. That is mainly what you want in this game. Now, there are other power-ups. They might drop a starfish, which are worth a certain number of points. Ooh, points, right? Gotta get that high score. I mean, once completion became the goal of a game, they probably should have just eliminated the scoring mechanism altogether, apart from reaching a certain threshold that earns you an extra life. Who cares, right? And in this particular case, there's something at stake, because when one of these creatures drops a prize, it immediately starts sinking to the ocean floor. Diver can swim down there, no problem. But the closer he is to the bottom of the playing screen, the more at risk he is to be blindsided by the second most common enemy, the jellyfish. Oh, the jellyfish. It may not have rows of teeth, but it's going to be the sea creature that gives you nightmares after playing this game. While the stingrays go from side to side, the jellyfish move up the screen. Well, that's predictable enough, right? Only one direction. Here's the thing, it's not a straight line. It's a zigzag, kind of drunken, non-pattern. They're just kind of moving diagonally, either toward the left or toward the right, and they're kind of moving in a disjointed and starting and stopping motion. Every pump propels them upward, either with a slight diagonal to the left or a slight diagonal to the right. And sometimes you're so focused on shooting a ray or chasing after a prize that you don't anticipate the possibility of them moving either of those directions, and that's most often how you end up dead in this game. Plus, since they're spawning at the bottom of the screen, if you go chasing a conch shell to the very bottom, you're helpless if one decides to begin its upward climb at that very point. And that's what you hear if you take just one hit from anything. The screen kind of flashes and you're sent spiraling down through the bottom of the screen from whence the jellyfish appear. Chilling, right? So how many of these conch shells do you actually need, and what do you get with them? Well, it varies depending on how far you've progressed in your ping-ponging between the two ports. The initial stop at what I've been calling the Bahamas gets you the Jaws tracker. That pulsates with this sound according to how near to your vicinity Jaws is. The closer he is, the faster it pulsates. Does it really help with anything? Not so much. The sight of the fin on the overhead map view is a dead enough giveaway, and, he's never really that far away, but it does serve to heighten the heart rate a bit when you hear this. Anything to raise the anxiety a little. That's what you're looking for in this sort of game. Something that'll tighten your sphincter enough to force a mistake. With each subsequent trip to the opposite port, first back to Florida, here's your favorite salad, I made it with cucumbers and also love. Then back to the Bahamas, then back to Florida, and so on. You get a power level increase, which basically raises the effectiveness of your harpoon gun specifically on Jaws. You'll note that it doesn't actually take down stingrays faster, which would help you survive those random encounters and gather up conch shells faster. No, just Jaws. Just Jaws. And with each power level increase, the cost of the next one goes up. So it makes for a situation where you kind of look forward to the random encounters. You kind of depend on them because you're faced with a constant shell shortage, at least if you're having success going back and forth between the two ports. If you're not, if you're dying along the way, then you're going to be faced with so many setbacks that you'll never get to a point where you need a particularly high shell total. But of course, that creates its own issues because you're not progressing in the game, right? Every time you're treated to that sight of the diver's scuba gear dangling by his leg as he drifts headfirst to the bottom of the ocean, you not only lose a life, you lose the Jaws tracker, making it the first thing you have to get again. You lose a power level. You lose half your shells. You're really falling behind. It really is a penalty that makes it so you're not really helped that much by having multiple lives. It could have been one of those one-and-done sort of games, but it isn't. And it's really kind of a shame because when you die, when you lose all of your lives, you're treated to this banger. Oh! Yeah! Oh, yes! We can tell where Jaws gets his seafood because that is a sizzler. Wow! And it's really the ultimate consolation when you're met with that hollow feeling facing down the game over screen where you realize you wasted 20 minutes of your life and you're thinking, oh, if that jellyfish had just angled it the other way. I tell you, nothing takes the sting out of death quite like making this sort of introduction to the afterlife. What? Break it down now. They call it the sweet release, right? No more mindless pursuits of conch shells. It's all over, and all that remains is blackness and jammin' tunes. You heard? Say it again now. The slide whistle at the end is an especially nice touch. See, that's another reason this game is so great. Win or lose, you still win. I'm told we have a special guest in our studio right now, someone with a close connection to the Jaws franchise, so I'm just going to get out of his way. Michael Caine, everyone. Hello, this is Michael Caine, here to talk about the 1987 film Jaws, The Revenge. A favourite from my own personal catalogue. We're not talking about Jaws.
The Revenge, my mistake. We're talking about Jaws, the video game, specifically for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Perfectly fine, if you ask me, taking the revenge part out of it. You see, an animal has no sense of justice. The revenge will be wasted on him. Plus, I once knew a man, a very wise man, living deep in the Himalayas. I went backpacking in Burma in my youth. And he told me, this man, he said, revenge gives the perpetrator even more hold on the victim. But I personally do like to sock a bloke when it's warranted. So anyway, these jaws are massive, and they belong to a shark, who seeks to use them on whatever he can clamp down upon. It just so happens there's a man in the water this time, and it just so happens this shark can't get his bloody mind off the man. So he pursues him, deep into the ocean from port to port, exhibiting completely unanimal-like behavior. He could just stay close. He could just eat. He could just swim. He could just enjoy all the benefits sea life has to offer. But see, some fish aren't looking for anything instinctual, like self-preservation. They can't be lured, baited, or redirected. Some fish just want to watch the world burn. I'm Michael Caine, and this is Jaws, the Revenge.
Okay, Michael Caine, thank you for that convoluted and exceedingly relevant viewpoint. What, like we're going to turn him down? We need the star power. You know, it's actually fitting that Michael Caine stopped by because apparently he plays the pilot in the movie that this game is more or less based on. And the plane actually plays an important role, at least with regard to shell accumulation. See, one of the shortcuts to getting what you need, provided you don't die and lose half your shell total, is the bonus round, where you take to a plane flying back and forth over the underwater view. This time, there's no diver, no rays, no sharks. It's just jellyfish. It's just jellyfish swimming, doing this kind of synchronized swim routine where they all 5 of them appear on the screen at once, do some kind of like squiggle or swirl, and then swim off the screen. And the planes flying back and forth, dropping cannonballs for some reason seems like overkill with jellyfish, right? I mean, they're not the most durable creatures. Cannonballs are some heavy artillery, but the plane drops cannonballs 3 at a time. You try and aim it as the plane is flying, as the jellyfish are moving, to take down enough of those jellyfish. Some pretty upbeat music is playing. It's kind of, you know, the day-to-day hunter be hunted motif that this game seems to thrive upon. Your number of hits are tallied up at the end, and you divide that number by 3, you get that many shells. You can usually score 4, 5, 6 this way. The round does get harder each time you do it, which is unfortunate. You end up getting fewer shells at the time of the game when you need more, but, you know, don't die. Be a good little boy or girl and save up for what you need. And then when the bonus round comes up, it can just be a cannonballing catharsis. And hey, you get some shells out of it. That's not bad, right? Now, when exactly the bonus round comes up is kind of mysterious. It always happens as you exit the underwater view, where you're, you know, after you've hit something, you're shooting rays, you're shooting jellyfish, you're collecting shells. Just at the end of that, whenever the time expires, instead of putting it back in your boat, you're up in the plane, the fun music is playing. It seems to happen most often when you encounter a shark. Not Jaws, necessarily, but there are other sharks in this game. They come along, and what's great about them is they always drop a shell when you defeat them. They always drop a conch shell. They take a ton of hits, but when they swim off the screen, they swim right back. They go back and forth on and off the screen and retain however many hits you give them. So if you just keep at it, you'll eventually take one down. A lot of times right after you pick up the shell they drop, it sends you to a bonus screen, but not always. And sometimes you might encounter multiple sharks. Not a bad thing. You get multiple shells that way. What really gets tricky is when these sharks start showing up, and then Jaws also comes in. It can make for a lot to dodge, and really that's the key to survival in this game, is just dodging everything it throws at you when you're under the water. You got the rays moving from right to left or from left to right. You got the jellyfish coming up from the bottom, moving in their zigzaggy pattern. They basically leave you alone. You just have to get out of the way. which is sometimes easier said than done because, of course, you're trying to shoot them and collect shells. But then you have the sharks. The small sharks and Jaws both move in the same way, left to right, on and off the screen, but they come after you. Wherever you are, they try to get you. They're not particularly fast. They're easy enough to dodge. You either have to swim over the top of them or swim down below them. But they force you to move. You can't just ignore them and go about your business taking down rays. And because there's always a shell to be gained from taking down the shark, you're incentivized to stay in their path, firing harpoons at them until the last second. Which, again, it's easy enough to avoid, but if you're not minding your surroundings, you could dodge right into a ray, or especially into a jellyfish who just so happened to change his course in the exact moment you did. And that's most often how you die. Not a direct blow from a shark or the big guy himself, but a situation where you get boxed in by all the ocean life around you. You have to be attentive. You have to have peripheral vision. You have to anticipate. You have to be at the top of your game. And this is especially true if you hit something and are forced out of the boat into the scuba gear in shallow water. Shallow water is, of course, any water that's adjacent to land on the world map, and you're dealing with about half the screen size when you do that. The surface of the water to the ocean floor takes up only about half the space as the typical underwater view, and that makes it especially dangerous because you just don't have as much room to operate. These are the encounters you want to avoid at all costs, which means you can't get too cute on the world map. Obviously, there are times when you do have to go near land, particularly as you're about to port, either in Florida or the Bahamas. The Florida port especially has you go up a little channel with land on both sides. It's really hard to avoid if you get hit with a random encounter there, but having less room to maneuver, particularly if it's an encounter that includes one of those shark heat-seeking missiles, is a recipe for death. It is. I mean, it looks cool. The shallow underwater view is more colorful overall, and my son loves it for that reason, but he's wrong. It's actually very bad. One other wrinkle the game throws at you as you progress is that, well, you'll get hit with these random encounters that aren't sort of the typical distribution between rays and jellyfish. You'll get assaulted by an especially nasty kind of enemy. One of my least favorite is the screen that's just jellyfish after jellyfish coming up from the ocean floor, and you're there at the surface of the water in between trying to dodge them and shoot them to get shells. I mean, it's kind of pointless when you're presented with this scenario to pursue the shells, because even if a jellyfish was to drop one on the way to chasing it to the ocean floor, you're going to have to dodge zigzagging jellyfish on the way down. It's treacherous. It's treacherous, to be sure. And then sometimes you're hit with random encounters, which are just one little shark after another. These aren't so bad because you collect a lot of shells, and when there's just sharks without the jellyfish that could take you out, it's pretty easy to avoid the sharks. You just have to be attentive and focus on hitting them and take them down. But it adds some variety to the stage of the game that you're playing through most often, and it kind of serves as an indicator that you're progressing pretty far here. The game is trying harder to trip you up. It's kind of like in Carmen Sandiego, when you arrive in the city where Carmen Sandiego is, and like a dagger gets thrown across the screen, and you're like, oh, I know I'm on the right track now. That's kind of what this is too. So you're zigzagging between the two ports, picking up power levels. Welcome to the Thunder. Don't take your shoes off and leave them by the door. Basic courtesy. You get to about power level 5, power level 6, and you're in a pretty good position to take down Jaws. Apparently there is another item you can pick up at the ports once you reach power level 9. You could pick up an extra strobe, which we'll get into what those are all about in a bit, but there's never reason to progress that far. First of all, you're likely to die before you do, and second of all, it's more power then you need to be able to take down Jaws. And what I mean by that, and this is the reason I think kids get discouraged, anytime you encounter Jaws, you obviously get an opportunity to deplete his health bar. His health bar is visible throughout the game in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Now, when you're at power level 1 and you encounter him, you're just pummeling him with harpoons, and his hit points barely go down. You may get a point or two off, and then the random encounter ends. You're back on the world map screen, and you'll notice his power level goes back up. Maybe all the progress you made against him is gone. He heals when you're not there harpooning him. And so it's like, shoot, all that effort to get his hit points down a couple notches, and I'm right back where I'm started. What is the point of this game? Well, you get that power level up, and when you have a random encounter with Jaws, or even if you have an intentional encounter with Jaws, when your power level reaches a point that you are seeking him out to in this game, well, you can deplete his hit points a lot faster. You can take out half his hit points in one encounter, chase him down again, and he hasn't had a chance to heal all that much. Take down the other half right there. It also seems like the game knows when you're at a point where you can deplete his energy all the way, it kind of extends that window of opportunity to do so in the encounter. It makes the encounter longer so that you have a chance to take him all the way down. So if you avoid dying and you do a good job of collecting shells in your random encounters, it doesn't take that long to pick up the necessary power level to take down Jaws. You always know where to find him. The game, the object of the game goes from leveling up to seeking out and destroying, and you can do it pretty efficiently. You make the call as to when it happens, and then you determine if you realistically have the firepower to do it. It might not take much more than 15 or 20 minutes, which is the key to this whole thing. You can complete it all in that short span of time if you know what you're doing, if you know your objective is to go from port to port and not just straight for Jaws, in which case it'll seem impossible to deplete his energy level. But once you've taken the necessary steps to power up, you can take him down pretty quickly. Now, it's not the end of the game when you do. Depleting his energy level takes you to another scenario. The final showdown between man and beast. You're on the surface of the water in the boat, but this time instead of being an overhead map view, it's a first-person view, kind of like a first-person shooter with the bow of the boat right there in the foreground. I mentioned strobes earlier. Well, here's where they come into play. You got the fin of Jaws swimming towards you along the top of the water. You got the requisite stressful music going on, which of course means you have to do something that requires timing and finesse. And the stakes are high. Do it wrong and Jaws gets away. Health refilled. Have to take him down all over again. Which, of course, isn't as bad as it sounds because you've already built up the power level. You already know you can deplete that bar pretty quickly, but it's wasted life. Not just video game life, but real life, which is the worst kind of life to waste, right? It's one of those slam your controller down kind of moments. Oh, why is this happening to me? So you want to get it right, and the way to do it right is wait for that shark fin to come up right to the front edge of the boat, right in the middle of the bow of the boat, and release a strobe with the A button, which will cause Jaws to leap out of the water, do a little pirouette, showing you his white underbelly, and at the precise moment that white underbelly is in front of the bow of the ship, you hit the B button to stab him with the bow of the ship. And the bow of the ship will jut out like it's independent from the rest of the ship. I don't know exactly the construction of this. We only see the bow. It's weird. But yes, it stabs forward, stabs him in his underbelly, and this time, that big old shark is the one sinking to the bottom of the ocean from whence the jellyfish come. Then, having saved the day, you fly off in a plane with Michael Caine, and everybody lives happily ever after? ? Nonsense. This shark will be haunting their dreams forever. So that's the game, more or less. A simple goal with simple means to that goal. Just a few different scenarios to play through. There you have it. So why do I like it so much? Again, it's the execution that's so perfect here. What those 3 self-doubters did with their month of development time was make a game that's highly playable and replayable, which is really saying something more than 30 years after the fact. The game constantly dangles a carrot in front of you, then dangles it a little further, then dangles it a little further. Far enough that you feel sufficiently challenged, but never so far that it feels impossible. Requiring you to power up multiple times to take on that enemy that you've already encountered before. You already know what it's going to take him down. You're on board with it. And because they've established a currency system for those power-ups in the form of conch shells, you never feel like you're wasting your time going from port to port. In fact, you almost look forward to those random encounters so that you get a chance to take down sea life and collect those shells under the sea. And really, it's that underwater scenario that's the crux of the game. It's where you spend most of your time. It's where you get to show off your skills. And they knock it out of the park. First of all, it looks great. The way the rays especially glide through the water. No pixelated edges or anything. They're well defined. They move just like a ray should move. It's convincing. It gets you into the game. And moving the way things should move is probably the single biggest thing this game gets right. The way the diver handles underwater controls. They're an aspect of a game that usually doesn't get a lot of attention. You know when they're wrong, but when they're right, yeah, you take them for granted. But because Nintendo games are so much about movement and timing, they're everything. Moving this diver, whether it's up or down, left or right, it feels like the way a diver would move if he was underwater. There isn't a suddenness to it. You know, you kind of have to build momentum. There's a slow response time at the beginning, but then it gets better once you're propelling in a certain direction. And just by describing it, I'm overcomplicating it, right? This isn't something you have to think about. It just comes naturally. It doesn't trip you up. It makes sense as you're playing the game. You get a feel for it quickly. You learn to operate within its constraints. And it works. You're sucked in. You're a diver underwater, shooting stingrays, dodging jellyfish, collecting conch shells before they sink to the bottom of the ocean floor. And occasionally daring to take on a shark, especially a massive one with giant, godlike jaws perfect for biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing. Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing. Yeah, that reminds me of a little ditty I know about a shark eating a man.
Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing. Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing.
Hey, the
Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing.
Joey Dad, what's a plant on your head?
Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing. Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing.
Floating
Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing.
Here's my
Biting, gnashing, chomping,
fin.
gashing,
Let's see if you can
chewing,
swim.
thrashing, and throat slashing. Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing. Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing.
Oh, you can. Sycophants, compliment my own plant.
Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing. Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing.
That's not true.
Gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing.
What's a view?
Gnashing, chomping, gashing,
Not a thing you can
thrashing,
do.
and throat slashing. Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing. Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing.
Gotcha
Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing.
My,
Biting,
ow.
gnashing, chomping, gashing,
Squirt it free,
chewing,
take a
thrashing,
bow.
and throat slashing. Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing. Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing.
It's
Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing.
Your
Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing,
Your
chewing,
lemons here
thrashing,
today.
and throat slashing. Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing. Biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing.
From
Biting,
down
gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and throat slashing.
Through your
Biting, gnashing, chomping,
hair,
gashing,
bumblebee everywhere.
thrashing, and through flashing, biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and through flashing, biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and through flashing,
Grinding
biting,
teeth.
gnashing, chomping, gashing, chewing, thrashing, and through flashing,
Smell
biting, gnashing, chomping, gashing,
the end is a relief. What's that? Is that a strobe? I'll jump out of the water and check it out.